Capricorn, pause for a moment. If you've been carrying more than your share, responsibility, pressure, silence, this message found you on purpose. You didn't break. You endured. And that endurance is now being answered. What's opening for you isn't luck, it's a long overdue return for everything you held together when no one saw. If your spirit is ready to receive, type I accept in the comments. Not to chase abundance, but to allow what you've already earned. Because Capricorn, the story unfolding now explains why you had to go through all of that. Capricorn, I want you to imagine this moment as if it's just you and me. No noise, no rush, just a quiet space where you can finally exhale. Because for a long time, you didn't really get to do that. You were the one who stayed steady while everything else felt uncertain. The one who showed up even when no one clapped, even when no one noticed. You carried responsibility the way others carry opinions. Silently, heavily. And maybe there were nights when you wondered if anyone truly saw how much you were holding together. The bills, the expectations, the unspoken promises you made to yourself and to the people who depended on you. You didn't complain. Not because it was easy, but because that's not how you're wired. You kept moving. One step, then another. Even when your heart felt tired and your mind never really rested. There's something important I need you to hear right now. And I want you to hear it slowly. Nothing about what you went through was wasted. Not the pressure. Not the loneliness. Not the seasons where it felt like you were giving more than you were receiving. All of it was shaping you into someone who could hold more. More stability, more responsibility, more abundance without losing yourself. You see, Capricorn, your strength was never loud. It was quiet, consistent, unshakable. And while others were chasing quick wins, you were building endurance. While others looked for shortcuts, you were learning what lasts. That kind of strength doesn't always get applause, but it earns something far more meaningful. Trust, respect, and eventually a return that matches the effort. If you pause for a second and look back honestly, you'll notice something subtle. You're not the same person you were before. Your boundaries are clearer now. Your values are stronger. Your sense of direction feels quieter but more certain. That's not accidental. Life was preparing you not just to survive pressure, but to move beyond it without bitterness, without resentment, without losing your integrity. And here's the part that most people don't realize. When someone like you keeps going without hardening their heart, without cutting corners, without giving up on themselves, life eventually responds. Not dramatically, not all at once, but steadily, reliably, in ways that actually last. So if you've been feeling a strange shift lately, a sense that something is quietly aligning, even if you can't fully explain it yet, that's not your imagination. It's the moment where effort begins to turn into return, where patience starts to feel lighter, where the weight you carried begins to redistribute itself. And as we stay right here in this space together, there's something else unfolding beneath the surface. Something shaped by everything you endured and guided by a timing far more precise than chance. Stay with me, because what's forming now has been waiting for you longer than you realize. Capricorn, stay right here with me for a moment. Let the quiet settle again, because there was a season not long ago when quiet did not feel peaceful at all. It felt heavy, unstable, like the ground beneath you shifted without asking for permission. You might remember how it happened. Not in one dramatic moment, but in a series of realizations that slowly added up. The plan you trusted stopped responding the way it used to. What once felt solid began to feel strained. Certain people who were always there suddenly weren't. Or maybe they were still physically present, but emotionally distant. Unavailable. Unable to meet you where you stood. And somewhere in the middle of all that, your relationship with work, with money, with security had to change. Not because you were careless. Not because you failed. But because the version of stability you were holding on to could no longer support who you were becoming. That kind of realization is not gentle. It shakes you. It forces questions you avoided asking because you were too busy surviving. Questions like, what am I actually building and who am I building it for? What is still aligned and what am I carrying out of habit? You may have felt disoriented then. Like you were starting over when you should have been farther along by now. But here's the truth most people don't see. What fell apart was not meant to last. It wasn't strong enough for the future that's forming around you. It couldn't stretch to hold the next chapter of your life. And Capricorn, you don't build fragile things. So life stepped in not to punish you, but to clear the structure, to remove weight that didn't belong to you. To strip away systems, relationships, expectations that were quietly draining you, even when they looked stable on the surface. You were asked to rebuild because you are capable of building something better. Something that doesn't require constant sacrifice just to stay standing. Something that supports you instead of consuming you. And even if it didn't feel like it at the time, you handled that collapse with integrity. You didn't become reckless. You didn't abandon your values. You adjusted. You learned. You observed. You took what worked and released what didn't, even when it hurt. That matters more than you realize, because rebuilding done consciously creates strength that cannot be shaken later. There's a quiet confidence that forms when you know you survived a breakdown without losing yourself. You may notice it now in the way you move through decisions. More deliberate, more selective. You don't rush anymore. You don't attach to things just because they look secure. You listen differently. To your body. To your intuition. To the subtle sense of whether something feels right or merely familiar. And in that awareness, something new begins to take shape. Not loudly. Not all at once. But steadily. Like a foundation being poured where the ground has finally been cleared. You might not see the full structure yet. But you can feel it. A sense that what's being built now is aligned with who you truly are, not just who you had to be to survive. And as that alignment deepens, life starts responding in quieter, more reliable ways. Support appears where there was resistance. Movement replaces stagnation. It becomes easier to trust the timing because you can sense that something solid is forming beneath your feet. So, if there's a part of you that still aches over what was lost, hold it gently. That loss created space. And space is where the next right thing finds you. Stay with that feeling for a moment. That subtle shift from recovery into quiet readiness. Because what's beginning to unfold now is shaped by everything you learned when you were forced to rebuild from the ground up. Capricorn, let's stay in this quiet space a little longer. Because there came a moment, not loud, not dramatic, when something inside you softened. Not because life became easier, but because you realized you could no longer fight everything at once. For so long, control felt like survival. Holding the wheel tightly, anticipating every turn, bracing for impact before it even arrived. That worked until it didn't. And one day, maybe without fully noticing it at first, you stopped gripping so hard. You didn't give up. That's important. You simply stopped forcing outcomes that were draining more life from you than they were giving back. You let yourself breathe. Just enough. You allowed a pause, not out of weakness, but out of wisdom you earned the hard way. There is a kind of courage that doesn't look like pushing forward. It looks like restraint. Like trusting yourself enough to move slower without feeling left behind. And when you did that, things began to respond differently. Not instantly, but subtly. The constant friction eased. Decisions felt less heavy. Moments of clarity appeared where there used to be only pressure. You may remember noticing it in small ways. A conversation that flowed instead of stalled. An opportunity that surfaced without you having to chase it. A sense that the timing was finally cooperating. What shifted wasn't the world first. It was you. You stopped treating rest as a reward and allowed it to be a requirement. You stopped proving your strength and started honoring it. And that's when momentum changed direction. Because Capricorn, when you are no longer operating from survival, you become magnetic. Life responds to steadiness, to grounded intention, to someone who knows where they're going but isn't desperate to arrive. That desperation was never yours anyway. It was learned, borrowed from pressure, inherited from expectations that were never fully yours. As that weight loosened, your path began to clear. Not because obstacles vanished, but because you were no longer fighting yourself while trying to move forward. You may feel it now as a quiet confidence. Not excitement that burns fast, but assurance that stays. A knowing that you don't have to rush. That what's meant for you will recognize you without you having to shout. This is where evolution begins. Not in chaos, not in constant effort, but in alignment. You're no longer reacting to life, you're responding. With intention, with discernment. And that changes everything, because when you move from that place, opportunities don't feel like lifelines. They feel like invitations. You choose differently now. What you commit to, who you give your energy to, what you say yes to, and what you quietly decline. That discernment is not closing doors. It's guiding you to the right ones. You may not see the full map yet, but you don't need to. The next step reveals itself only when you're ready to take it without fear driving your pace. And right here, in this calm determination, something begins to shift beneath the surface. A sense of movement that doesn't require force. A feeling that what once felt delayed is now simply aligning. Stay with that sensation, that quiet forward pull, because the road responding to you now is shaped by the moment you chose trust over tension. Capricorn, stay with me right here. Feel the steadiness in your breath, because something has been quietly moving toward you. Not rushing, not demanding attention, just approaching with certainty. Money, support, relief, but not in the way people usually talk about it. This isn't a sudden stroke of luck or a random break handed to you by chance. What's finding its way to you now has a memory. It remembers the nights you stayed up late, working through details no one else wanted to handle. It remembers the responsibilities you accepted when it would have been easier to say no. It remembers the patience you practiced when progress felt slow and recognition felt distant. You may not have called it planting seeds. You probably just called it doing what needed to be done. But every effort carries energy. Every decision leaves an imprint. And nothing you gave was invisible. For a long time, it may have felt like you were putting out more than you were getting back. Like the scale was tilted. You kept going anyway. That's the part most people miss. And now, the balance begins to correct itself. You might notice it first as a sense of easing. A financial concern that no longer presses as hard. An obligation that lightens. A number that shifts in your favor without drama. Or it may come through a conversation. An offer that aligns with your experience. Someone recognizing your reliability, your consistency, your ability to handle what others cannot. This isn't about chasing opportunity. It's about opportunity recognizing you. What's arriving now is connected to who you have already proven yourself to be. Not who you promised to become. Not who you pretended to be. But who you showed up as when no one was watching. And Capricorn, there's something deeply stabilizing about that. Because when resources come from earned trust, from accumulated wisdom, from lived experience, they don't destabilize you. They settle in. They support. They stay. You don't feel reckless with this kind of flow. You feel grounded. It doesn't make you anxious. It makes you clearer. You may notice yourself thinking differently, not just about money but about value. What is worth your time now? What deserves your energy? What no longer requires your sacrifice? There's a quiet dignity in receiving what matches your effort, and maybe part of you is still adjusting to that. Still learning that it's okay to receive without guilt, that abundance doesn't have to arrive wrapped in struggle to be deserved. This timing is intentional, not too early, because you weren't ready then, not too late, because you are now. You have the discernment to use what comes in wisely. the maturity to protect it, the foresight to build with it instead of burning through it. That's why this phase feels different. It's not exciting in a chaotic way. It's reassuring, like realizing you're no longer bracing for impact. And as this sense of support settles around you, something else shifts quietly inside. A deeper trust. Not just in life but in yourself. A knowing that you can sustain what's coming without losing your balance. Sit with that feeling for a moment. That calm confidence. That grounded readiness. Because what's aligning now is not just about what you receive, but about what you're finally prepared to hold. Capricorn, let's slow this moment down together. Because what's happening now doesn't ask for urgency. It asks for presence. For the first time in a long while, the energy around you feels even. Not flat, not dull, just steady. And I know that might feel unfamiliar. You lived so long inside pressure that calm once felt suspicious. Like something must be wrong if nothing was demanding your attention. But this calm is different. It isn't empty. It's supportive. The flow surrounding you now doesn't pull you forward by force. It doesn't keep you awake at night, running numbers in your head, or rehearsing worst-case scenarios. It moves with you. Money, effort, rest, responsibility, they're no longer fighting each other for space. They're learning how to coexist. And that's not accidental. You earned this balance the same way you earned everything else. Through awareness, through restraint, through choosing not to sacrifice yourself just to prove your worth. You may notice it in small, quiet ways. You stop overextending. You pause before saying yes. You feel less guilt about protecting your time, and nothing falls apart because of it. In fact, things begin to function better. You're not rushing to fill gaps anymore. You're allowing things to meet you halfway. That's a profound shift for someone like you. Because you were taught that stability only comes from constant effort. From being the strong one. From carrying more than your share so others don't have to feel the weight. But now, you're learning a different truth. Stability can also come from alignment. From knowing when enough is enough. From understanding that your value does not increase through exhaustion. This stage of your life doesn't require you to harden. It invites you to soften without losing your backbone. And that's a rare balance. You're not careless with resources now. But you're no longer afraid of them either. You don't cling. You don't push away. You allow flow with discernment. There's a quiet respect you hold for yourself that wasn't always there before. You recognize when your energy is being drained, and you step back without apology. You recognize when something supports your growth, and you commit without fear. That clarity changes everything. Because when your inner world is steady, your outer world responds differently. Opportunities don't feel overwhelming. Decisions don't feel paralyzing. Responsibility doesn't feel like a burden. It feels manageable, structured, clean. This is what real stability feels like. Not flashy, not loud, but dependable. Like knowing you can rest and nothing will collapse in your absence. Like trusting that what you've built can stand without constant supervision. That's a powerful realization. And it affects more than money. It changes how you show up in relationships, how you speak to yourself, how you envision the future. You're no longer operating from fear of loss. You're operating from trust in foundation. And that trust didn't appear overnight. It was forged through everything you survived and everything you chose to learn instead of resent. So if you feel calmer lately, if the urgency has softened, if life feels less like a test and more like a rhythm, let that be okay. You're not losing momentum. You're finding sustainability. And as you continue moving from this place, balanced, grounded, self-respecting, something even deeper begins to align quietly around you. Not something that demands action right away, but something that invites intention. A sense that what you're building now isn't just stable, it's meaningful. And that meaning will guide what unfolds next in a way that feels natural, almost inevitable. Capricorn, let me sit with you here for a moment longer. There is a different quality to the air around you now. Not urgency, not pressure, but intention. You have never been someone who chased quick outcomes. You were never wired that way. Even when life pushed you into survival mode, some part of you always knew that shortcuts would cost you more in the long run. And now, that knowing is coming back online. You are no longer thinking in days or weeks. Your mind naturally moves farther ahead, quietly, instinctively. You notice it when you consider decisions. You ask yourself not just, will this work right now, but will this still matter years from now? That shift alone changes everything. Because what you are building now is not meant to impress. It is meant to endure. There is something deeply grounding about that. A sense of calm that comes when you stop gambling with your future and start investing in it. You are not obsessed with accumulation. You are focused on structure, how things fit together, how they support one another, how they protect the people you care about, including yourself. And maybe for the first time, you are allowing yourself to think about legacy without feeling the weight of it as a burden. Legacy does not have to mean pressure. It can mean peace. It can mean knowing that what you are putting into place now will continue to hold value even when you step back. There is a quiet dignity in that. You begin to notice how your relationship with money evolves. It feels less emotional, less reactive. You are not trying to prove anything anymore. Not to the world, not to your past. You make choices that feel steady, measured, thought through, not because you are afraid to risk, but because you risk what you are protecting. Your time, your energy, your future. And maybe you are surprised by how natural this feels. As if this pace was always meant for you. You start thinking about what truly matters. Security that does not come at the cost of your health. Stability that allows for rest. Resources that support life instead of consuming it. This is not about hoarding. It is about stewardship. You are learning how to care for what you have built with patience, with foresight, with responsibility that feels chosen, not forced. And that intention has weight. It shapes outcomes. It influences timing. It attracts opportunities that are aligned with longevity, not volatility. You may notice fewer dramatic swings now, less chaos, less uncertainty. Instead, things grow quietly, incrementally, reliably, and that might not make headlines, but it builds something far more powerful. Trust. Trust in yourself. Trust in your decisions. Trust that you are no longer building from fear, but from clarity. As this foundation takes form, there is a sense of quiet confidence that settles in. You are not rushing to finish. You are not worried about being behind. You understand now that what lasts cannot be rushed. And there is comfort in knowing that what you are creating has room to breathe, room to adapt, room to support you and the people you love for years to come. So if you feel yourself thinking more carefully lately, planning more deliberately, imagining a future that feels grounded instead of uncertain, that is not hesitation. That is wisdom integrating. And as you continue moving with that steady intention, there is a quiet unfolding happening alongside you. A sense that what you are preparing for is not just stability but significance. Not in a loud way, in a lasting one. And that quiet certainty will guide the shape of what comes into your life next with a precision that feels almost natural, as if has been waiting for you to be ready to build something that truly endures. Capricorn, let me speak to you gently here. There is a presence about you now that wasn't always this steady. Not because you lacked strength before, but because that strength was once tied to survival. You had to react quickly, protect yourself, anticipate outcomes before they arrived. Fear did not run you, but it stood close enough to influence your pace. That has changed, and the shift is subtle, so subtle that others may not notice it yet. But you feel it. There is a calm authority settling into your body, not loud, not demanding, just clear. You no longer wake up bracing for impact. You no longer replay old scenarios trying to fix what already passed. The past still exists, but it does not pull on you the way it once did. You learned from it. You carried its lessons forward, and then you set it down. That alone is leadership. Real leadership does not come from control, it comes from self-possession. And Capricorn, you are reclaiming that now. You notice it in how you make decisions. You pause. You listen inwardly. You choose without rushing. Emotion still exists. Of course it does. But it no longer hijacks the moment. Fear still whispers sometimes. But it no longer holds the microphone. You hear it. And then you move anyway. That is clarity. There is something deeply grounding about knowing why you say yes. And why you say no. You are no longer proving yourself. You are directing yourself. That distinction matters, because when you are not led by urgency, you become trustworthy. To others, and more importantly, to yourself, you begin to recognize that people respond differently to you now. They listen. They wait for your input. They sense your steadiness even if they cannot explain it, and you do not need to dominate the room to command respect. Your presence does that quietly. You are becoming someone others look to when things feel uncertain, not because you have all the answers, but because you do not panic. You hold space. You assess. You act with intention. That is the kind of leadership that changes environments, not through force, but through example. You guide simply by how you move, by how you respond under pressure, by how you remain centered when others lose their footing. And Capricorn, this leadership does not exhaust you anymore. It aligns you. You are no longer dragging yourself forward through willpower alone. You are moving because it feels right, because you trust yourself now. That trust is everything. It allows you to stand in your decisions without second-guessing every step. It allows you to release outcomes without losing direction. You are firm without being rigid, open without being naive. That balance is rare, and it did not come easily. It came from everything you endured, everything you reflected on, everything you chose to integrate instead of run from. So if you feel stronger lately but not hardened, more decisive but less reactive, let that be acknowledged. You earned this composure. You are no longer chasing control. You are embodying authority. And as you continue moving from this place, others will naturally find their footing around you. Not because you tell them what to do, but because your steadiness gives them permission to steady themselves too. There is a quiet responsibility in that. One you carry well. And as this grounded leadership continues to take shape, something else begins to respond. Life meets you differently when you stand fully inside yourself. Opportunities arrive with respect. Timing becomes more precise. And what unfolds next does not require force, only alignment. Stay with that sense of command, that calm certainty. Because the way you are leading your life now is shaping what finds you with remarkable accuracy. Capricorn, stay with me a little longer. Let this moment land. Because after everything we've walked through together, there's one question that often rises quietly in your chest, not spoken out loud, but felt. Was it worth it? All the restraint, all the responsibility, all the nights you kept going when it would have been easier to stop caring. That question doesn't come from weakness. It comes from honesty. And I want to answer it in a way that reaches you not as advice but as recognition. Yes, it was worth it. Not because suffering itself has value, but because you transformed it into strength, into clarity, into wisdom that now lives in your body. You didn't just survive difficult seasons. You refined yourself through them. And life responds to that kind of refinement. Not with noise, not with spectacle, but with alignment. You may already feel it. A sense that things are easing into place. That the constant resistance is fading. That you're no longer swimming upstream just to stay afloat. Resources begin to move differently around you now. Not rushed, not chaotic. Steady. Support shows up without you having to demand it. Stability feels reachable instead of fragile. And there's a quiet relief in realizing you no longer have to prove that you deserve rest. You no longer have to earn permission to feel secure. That permission comes from within now. And that's why what's arriving feels safe. The flow opening around you doesn't threaten your balance. It reinforces it. It meets you at your level of maturity, at your level of discernment. You know how to hold this. You know how to receive without overextending, without guilt, without fear that it could all disappear overnight, because you've built something real inside yourself. You trust your instincts now. You trust your pacing. You trust your ability to adjust without collapsing. That trust changes everything. It allows you to open your hands instead of clenching them, to receive without bracing. And Capricorn, this is not about entitlement. It's about alignment. You are in rhythm with what you've earned, with what you've learned, with what you are ready to sustain. So when abundance moves toward you, it doesn't overwhelm. It integrates. It becomes part of your life instead of disrupting it. And maybe the most meaningful part of all is how this changes the way you see yourself. Not as someone who must always endure, but as someone who is allowed to enjoy the results of endurance. You begin to soften in ways that feel safe. You allow moments of peace without waiting for the other shoe to drop. You look ahead not with anxiety, but with measured hope. And that hope is grounded. It's realistic. It's earned. So if there is any part of you still hesitating to receive, still questioning whether this chapter is real, let me say this gently. You are not taking something that belongs to someone else. You are stepping into what has been moving toward you for a long time. Quietly, patiently, just like you. Allow yourself to receive it without explanation, without apology. Because the life responding to you now is not rewarding luck. It is honoring consistency. And as you continue forward from this place, grounded, steady self-possessed, you'll notice something beautiful. Receiving no longer feels like an event. It feels like a natural continuation of the way you've learned to live. Balanced, intentional, whole. And that wholeness will keep guiding what finds you with a kind of precision that feels less like chance and more like quiet justice finally arriving right on time. Capricorn, before you go, take one more breath with me. Not to hold on to this moment, but to recognize it. Because something has shifted tonight. Not outside of you. Inside. You didn't come here just to listen. You came to remember who you are when the noise fades and the pressure loosens its grip. You came to hear yourself reflected back with clarity, with respect. And maybe the surprise is not that life is finally responding to you, but that you are ready to receive it without doubt. That's power. If this message resonated with you, if it felt like it was speaking directly to your path, leave a comment below and write, "I trust myself now." Not for anyone else to see, but as a quiet agreement with yourself. And if you're part of this Capricorn family, or you feel called to walk this journey with us, make sure you're subscribed. These messages build on each other. And what's coming next meets you exactly where you are now. This is not the end of the story. It's a steady continuation. More clarity is forming. More guidance is aligning. And the next message is already on its way to you. Until then, stay grounded. Stay open. And remember, you didn't endure all of that just to survive. You endured it to arrive here.